WhyGuru Sahib Ji, Dandaut Bandan Anakvar, Sarbakala Samarath, Dolan Te Rakho Prabhu, Nanak De Karahath, Sura So Pehchaniya, Jo Lare Deen Ke Het, Purja Purja Katmara, Kabhu Na Chade Khet, Sagal Dwar Ko Chad Ke, Gayo Toharo Dwar, Bahe Gahe Ki Laj As, Gobind Das Tohar. WhyGuru Ji Ka Khalsa, WhyGuru Ji Ki Fateh. So, Sangat Ji, we're blessed to be here today in the sanctuary of Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. And with Maharaj's Kirpa, I'm able to give a talk on the basics of 1984. Now, there's a lot of things that happened during 1984 and we get really confused about it. So I've broken it down into three simple topics. So we're going to talk about what happened before 1984, which is from 1947 to 1984, and then the actual battle itself that took place at Harmandir Sahib, and then the actual genocide that took place in November 1984. And it all started in 1947 when it came to the independence of India. And Sikhs played a massive role in actually freeing India from the British. And even though we only made up 2% of the whole population of India, we gave 71% of sacrifices, 71% of shahidiyan to free India from the British. And 81% of the life imprisonments given by the British for the freedom of India were made by the Sikhs as well. And at that time, the Muslims were now given Pakistan, the Hindus had India, and then the Sikhs also had a choice, do they want their own homeland as well? But for some reason, we decided to decline that offer. Now that might seem like such a silly decision, but that's because of this guy. And he was the first Prime Minister of India, the name of Nehru Gandhi. He was the father of Indira Gandhi. And we were assured by the Indians, we were ensured that if we as Sikhs, we stay within India, we're going to live a fruitful life. We're able to experience the glow of freedom within India. Because he said himself, he said that you guys fought by our sides like brothers, and now it's best that you stay with us and you'll experience that glow of freedom. On top of that, you had Mohandas Gandhi, also known as Mahatma Gandhi, but he's not much of a Mahatma. And he said that Sikhs, they know how to safeguard their rights by exercise of arms. So nowadays, when we get a bit confused and when other people get confused about why do Sikhs pick up Shastra when it comes down to defending themselves, well, the person that's actually on their currency, who they see as a father figure of India, he's saying it himself, that Sikhs know how to safeguard their rights. And don't get surprised if you are to take away their rights that they're going to defend themselves. And he even said himself that the Sikhs have no reason to fear that they would betray them, that the Indian government would betray the Sikhs. So we were given all these assurances that you guys can stay with us and you'll be fine. You'll experience the freedom and everything will be a-okay. But this last point is really important, which what he said at the bottom here, is no constitution will be acceptable to the Congress which did not satisfy the Sikhs. Now that's really important to remember, because now a few years later, after he made this exact statement, you had the Indian constitution that was created. And in here, in Article 25, it literally denotes Sikhs, Jains, and Buddhists as a section of Hinduism. So if you see Hinduism, you got rishis on one side, and then you got the Agori sadhus on the other side that eat brains, and you got the rishis here doing a lot of meditation. And we've just put into that category now, that Sikhs are just a branch of Hinduism. Not only that, but then also, as Sikhs, we have an Anand Karaj. They even took away the Anand Karaj Act to actually see that Sikhs, actually, when they get married, it's called an Anand Karaj. So they even took away that. They just said it's also a Hindu ritual and a Hindu ceremony. So this was kind of the foundation for denial of minorities and their rights and their identity. So we're not even considered Sikhs within India now. And then you had Punjab not being given its first language status. So if you see Gujarat, Gujarat, the first language status within Gujarat is Gujarati. Now in Punjab, the first language status should be Punjabi, right? But it's not given Punjabi. The first language is Hindi. Now, Punjab, what does Punjab mean? Land of the five rivers. Now, the land of the five rivers, all that water now is being diverted to other states of India. Now, that might seem like not much of a big deal, but if you actually research how much of a big deal that is, that means all the river water that's coming into Punjab, by building canals and dams, all of it is getting diverted to other states of India now. Now, not only the water, but also the electricity. So when you go to India and you go to Punjab, you'll notice that the bijli goes a lot, the electricity goes. And that's all because of the electricity being pushed out to other states as well. And they weren't even, and the Punjabis weren't given any compensation for this. Now, because of all this rights being taken away from the Punjabis, all the Punjabis rallied together now. And it wasn't just Sikhs, it was Sikhs and Punjabis from all faiths rallying together against these injustices. And this fueled something called the Punjabi Subha movement. And this was a political agitation launched by the Sikhs demanding the creation of a Punjabi-speaking state. So in 1955, they even declared it that you're not even allowed to make any nare for this Punjabi Subha movement either. So that same Prime Minister that we spoke about earlier, Nehru, who said that you're going to experience the glow of freedom, now he's saying, after we're now protesting for our rights, he's saying that enough is enough, and if you do not stop your protests, I'll teach you a hard lesson that you will not forget for many generations to come. And on top of that, he said, how can I entrust the power to the enemy? So first we're the heroes for fighting for their rights and the freedom of India, and now we're considered the enemy. And now 1984 wasn't the first time that the Indian government actually entered the Darbar Sahib. So when the Punjabi Subha movement was happening, and all the protests were happening, in Darbar Sahib, they rallied together within Darbar Sahib, and the Indian government and the Indian army actually went into Darbar Sahib, shooting protesters, firing tear gas at them, and about 12,000 people were arrested at that time. Now that was during the 1950s, so we went through 1947 to 1950s, and then in the 1960s, you had the Green Revolution, meaning that all the farmers were given pesticides and chemicals to put into their land, into their Kirtan, and they were promised that it would basically, you get a higher yield on your crop. So that if you were to use these chemicals and pesticides, you would be able to grow more crops and make more money. But what they weren't told is that that then pollutes the land, which means you cannot grow more on top of that land afterwards. It becomes unfertile. So the farmers now have to buy more chemicals, more pesticides, how do they get that money? Through getting more loans and being in debt. And that just caused more farmer suicide rates, which is still happening today. And then this is another sort of term that gets thrown around, which is the Punjab Reorganisation Act. And this is, if we're going to take anything away from today, this is one of the things I want you guys to remember as well. Because when it comes to fighting for our rights, this act is still within the Indian Constitution. So if we're ever going to fight for our rights, this is something that everyone needs to know about. Because this is one of the acts that needs to get out of the Constitution altogether. And in 1966, you had Punjab, the left side of Punjab, that's now part of Pakistan now, and then the right side of Punjab, East Punjab. In 1958, it was separated, and it was divided off to Himachal Pradesh. And then in 1966, we had the creation of Haryana. Now, why this is a big deal is because now Haryana and Punjab now share a capital city. So everyone's heard of Chandigarh, right? So Chandigarh is the capital city of Punjab, but now it's also the capital city of Haryana. So that piece of land now, Chandigarh, has become union territory. What that means is that now Punjab is not able to govern its own laws. The government in Delhi is able to impose a law on Punjab without any approval from Punjab. And this is the only state within India, the only two states within India where this has happened. Nowhere else has this happened at all. So when we talk about when Nehru was giving us these assurances about you will experience the glow of freedom, this doesn't sound like freedom so far. And now you had the state of emergency. What this was is Indira Gandhi had become prime minister now, and she got caught rigging the elections. And she was actually supposed to be barred from the elections for 6 years. But she found a loophole within the Indian constitution, which means that she was able to put the whole country of India into a state of emergency, which meant, and she'd done this under eternal disturbance. And this meant that she was able to rule all of India like a dictator. That means any sort of political opponents that she had, they were imprisoned. Any media that was being censored, anyone that would report it, they would get put into prison. And you had Sanjay Gandhi, who was her son, and he was going on a mass sterilization of all of India. And I'll go into that in a minute. And the people that were on the front lines defending India's rights were the Sikhs. And 40,000 Sikhs were put into prison during this state of emergency for 2 years. And what sterilization means is that what he was doing is the Sanjay Gandhi was going to poor villages, grabbing all the men and making them unfertile, meaning they can't have more babies after. And this was by doing operations on them, and not all of the operations were actually going to plan. And quite a few people, 2,000 men actually died from botched operations. He sterilized 6.2 million Indian men in just 1 year, which was 15 times the number of people sterilized by the Nazis. Yeah? So now this wasn't just Punjab and the Sikhs that didn't like Indira Gandhi. This was the whole of India that didn't like her now. And you'll see that, what you'll see in the next slides coming up is that it wasn't just the Punjabis and Sikhs that hated Indira Gandhi now, it was all of India. And you'll see what kind of plan she came up with now in the coming slides. So now, because of this state of emergency and all these injustices, the Akali Dal, which is a political party run by Sikhs, and they drafted this called the Anandpur Resolution Act. So one of the things I wanted you guys to take away from today was the Reorganization Act of 1966, and this is very important to everyone to read. The Anandpur Sahib Resolution, drafted in 1975. Now, when we talk about what can we do, at the end of this, when we talk about what can we do for the Panth or anything like that, everything that's in this resolution is what we can do. Everything that they drafted in this resolution hasn't even been implemented today. Probably only one of them has. So these were a set of demands that were against the central government, and you had things like decentralization of power, meaning that India was not able to have a dictator and a state of emergency again. Chandigarh to be given back to Punjab as the state of the capital city of Punjab. Redistribution of wealth and resources, so taxing the poor less than the rich, having our water rights back, our language rights. You know, the second language of Punjabi for neighboring states of Punjab as well. So you have Haryana and you have Himachal Pradesh. So now those first languages are now Hindi in those states. But now the second language isn't even Punjabi now. In Haryana, the second language was Telugu. And that was only based off a 0.02% population of people that actually spoke that language. So only 0.02 people spoke that language, but that was given the second language status. So it's clear that they were trying to just kill Punjabi from this area of India now. And if you think about it, Guru Granth Sahib Ji is written in Gurmukhi Punjabi. So if we get away from Punjabi, Gurmukhi, we don't know how to read or speak it, then we're getting further and further away from our Guru as well. And the last one was having Kirtan broadcasted from Harmandir Sahib, which happens now, but you'll see that they only gave this after the attack to kind of appease the Sikhs. Now, like any sort of protest or any sort of demand given to a government, this is all done through agitations and protests. So now, this is when the Dharam Yudh Morcha comes in. So between 1982 and 1984, the Sikhs all rallied together to then protest against the government to have the Anandpur Sahib Resolution Act implemented. Now, you go home to any of your grandparents and ask them if they know about the Anandpur Sahib Resolution. Because I tried doing it, nobody knew what I was talking about. And this is all because of the censorship through the media and all the propaganda that was spread by the Indian government, so that we don't even know about something like the Anandpur Sahib resolution. We don't know anything about the Dharam Yudh Morcha. These things were so important for us to learn about, because then we can get a whole big idea of why the attack actually happened and why the Anandpur Sahib resolution is still relevant today. So the Dharam Yudh Morcha was run by Longowal and Sant Kartar Singh Pindrawale. And these Anandpur Sahib Resolution Act would have helped everybody. It would have helped all of India. It would have helped not just the Sikhs, it would have helped the Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians, everybody living within India, especially Punjab. And all the demands were economic based. So what they were doing, they were having roadblocks, blocking the canals, strikes from work, and even courting arrest. So purposely doing things to get arrested to protest against this. And you saw this in the Kisan Morcha as well. We had the set of demands given to the government, but they didn't listen to them. So they had to sleep on the streets of Delhi. And just a quick story about Sant Kartar Singh. In 1975, in Delhi, for the 300th anniversary of Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji's Shahidi, there was about 2.2 million people there. And they were sitting in the Darbar like this, and Indira Gandhi walks in. And as she walked in, everybody in the Sangat stood up. So that's like King Charles walking in or something, and everyone and all of us just stand up. And at that time, Indira Gandhi came onto the mic, gave her a little 2 pence on the mic, and then she sat back down. And then Sant Kartar Singh stood up on the mic, and he's saying that, who the hell is she, yeah, for us all to just stand up in the presence of Guru Granth Sahib Ji, who's our King of Kings. He's saying that if it wasn't for Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib Ji, she would have been walking in here with a burqa on. She would have been a Muslim. Instead of greeting you guys with namaste, she would have been saying salam. Yeah? So even if she was to cut off her head as many times as she's got hair on her body, even then the debt wouldn't have been paid to Guruji for what he had done for the faith of Hinduism. And at that time there was so many Jakari let off, and he kind of embarrassed Indira Gandhi at this point. Now, why this is important to remember is because now you had the Dharam Yudh Morcha, you had all these protests against the government, but now you could say it got a little bit personal as well. And now this whole agenda against the Sikhs had started. Because we weren't kind of shutting up, you could say. The Sikhs weren't shutting up, Punjab wasn't laying low, we were still protesting again and again and again for the Anandpur Sahib Resolution Act to be fulfilled. And 250,000 Punjabis were caught in arrest. So many people were getting arrested, so this movement was massive. So many people were getting arrested that they didn't even have enough space in jails to actually keep all these prisoners. And now this is where she started to manipulate the Dharam Yudh Morcha. So she started saying that there's lawlessness in Punjab. Now, we know Margaret Thatcher, right? She used to be the Prime Minister of England, and everybody hated her as well. But what she did was she purposely caused a war within the Falkland Islands. Everyone considered her, after they won the war, everyone considered her a hero now. So she used this same tactic to create this propaganda that there's lawlessness in Punjab, that Punjab is full of terrorists, and people that are part of this morcha are terrorists. They want to be separate from India. They're causing so much violence. And it was all to just discredit the peaceful protests led by these Sikhs. And you could see that they actually exaggerated it to such an extent that if you actually just look at the statistics, in the 20-month agitation, so in the 20 months of the Dharam Yudh Morcha, there were 300 killings. That means there was about 15 deaths a month. But if you compare that to Delhi, in 1983, there was 244 people murdered. In Uttar Pradesh, in 1980 to 1981, you had 10,490 people murdered. And in that same year, Punjab had 1,164 people murdered. So it's clear that it was just a clear exaggeration to basically make it look like that there's lawlessness in Punjab. Now, on top of everything that I've just mentioned, the Sikhs were just still getting attacked through something called a fake encounter. And what a fake encounter is that the Sikhs were getting picked up by the police, and while they're in custody, they're getting killed. And what they would blame it on is that those Sikhs that we killed, we had to kill them because there was an exchange of fire. they were firing back at us, so we had to fire back at them. And this is just one of the instances that Santaji actually spoke about, is that Bhai Gurmeet Singh, who was the son of his parents, was caught, his nails were pulled out, and salt was poured over his wounds. His hands were burnt by placing candles under the palms of his hands. And when they were trying to torture him, he wasn't saying anything. He wasn't giving any information about anything. And at that point, all he's saying is Satanam WhyGuru, Satanam WhyGuru. And then the bulla, who was the senior police officer, actually just said, just shoot him. And they shot him in cold blood. And this is just one instance. This was happening all over Punjab. And something that I forgot to mention is that Sant Kartar Singh who started the Dharam Yudh Morcha. After they had passed away, this is where then Santji came in, Sant Jarnail Singh Khalsa came in to actually take over and led the Dharam Yudh Morcha. Then you have the RSS, the right-wing Hindu organization, who were trying to infiltrate Sikhi, trying to confuse the Sikhs, saying that Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji didn't do anything for Sikhi, saying that he was just a thief and that's why he was beheaded, spreading pictures like this of a cow, which is their holy cow, with the Guru's pictures in the cow, and saying that the Amrit that we drink is actually the milk that comes from the cow. So we're getting attacked from all angles at this point now. Then we're getting attacked through the Nirankaris. The Nirankari was another government-funded cult pretending to be Sikhs. And they were basically disrespecting Guru Granth Sahib Ji, Sikhi. And who you see on the left is actually their leader, who was Gurupachana, who pretended to be the fake Guru. He even said stuff like, I'm the 11th Guru. He even stood on top of Guru Granth Sahib Ji with his feet, slandering the Guru, praying how we have Panj Pyare. He said that I'm going to make the 7 stars, the Sat Satare. Really disrespecting Sikhi to a high, high level. And on the day of Vaisakhi in 1978, they started a morcha, like a protest. And they were just shouting out slogans, slandering the Guru. And at that time, Bhai Fauja Singh, who you see on the right here, he rallied a bunch of Singhs together, about 200 Singhs together, to go peacefully protest against this. Saying that how can it be in Amritsar, there's people out there that are slandering our Gurus and we're not going to do nothing about it. So as they protested against this, they actually started to get attacked by the Nirankaris. Not only with crowbars or stones, bricks, but they actually started firing upon the peaceful protesters. And this was all happening in the presence of the police. And DSP Joshi, who was the deputy superintendent, even he shot at Bhai Fauja Singh, to the point where he even shot him in the eye, and he got a layer of his dastar, covered his eye, and said, "That's it. It's time to give Shahidi now." Taking people away from the protest, like getting them to safety, but then saying, "You know what, Shahidi samada aa gaya, let's just give Shahidi now." And at that time, 13 Guru Sikhs were made Shaheed on that day. Now, I just want to clear some misconceptions about Santji as well. And there's a lot of things that are said that confuse us, and we get a bit, you could say we get a bit confused as well, because we buy into the propaganda if we don't know much about these things. So who was Sant Jarnail Singh Khalsa? They were the 14th leader of Damdami Taksal in 1977. And before we see them as this warrior, they were actually known as an Abhyasi Sikh, meaning that they were continuously engrossed in Gurbani. Yeah? Not only did they do their Panj Bani every day, on top of that they would do Panj Granthi, which takes about 4 hours if you just read it on a normal pace. Then you have your Panj Baniya, which takes about an hour as well. And on top of that, they'll read 50 angs of Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and do 100 Japji Sahibs a day. So when Bhai Sukhdeep Singh was talking about being a Sant first and then a Sipahi, this was all the spiritual earnings, all the kamai that they were building up for what was to come in 1984. And their main mission was for everyone to just stop taking intoxicants, stop taking drugs and alcohol, take Amrit, become a Guru Sikh of the Guru. And even in this, if you really study what they were saying, in one of their speeches said that my mission is to administer Amrit, to explain the meanings of Gurbani and to teach the Gurbani to those around me, And that a Hindu should be a true Hindu, Muslim should be a true Muslim, and a Sikh should be a true Sikh. And then these are some of the things that you would hear as well, that Pindrawale was a separatist, he was fighting for Khalistan. But if you notice that anything that I've just mentioned so far, I haven't mentioned Khalistan once. So nothing was ever going to be about Khalistan. Yeah? And what the media does is, this whole propaganda machine that's working, is that they'll carry on saying a lie again and again and again and again until someone ends up believing it, and then there's a whole group of people that believe this lie. So as Sikhs of our Guru, we need to make sure we educate ourselves on what really happened, so that when people are lying, we could just straight away just reply back to them saying, no, this is wrong. If you really study what they were saying, they were saying that I'm not for Khalistan and I'm not against it either. If we were given Khalistan, then we won't make the same mistake that we made in 1947. We'll take it. And that if the Indian government was to attack Harmandir Sahib, that will be the foundation of Khalistan. So it was never a demand from the very offset. It was always about having the Anandpur Sahib resolution to be fulfilled. And then you would hear, why did Santaji fortify Harmandir Sahib? I'm just going to skip over this one because it's a bit of a silly one, really. If someone's going to attack your house and you know about it, you'll defend it. And this is evident in all of our history as well. And then you have the Akal Takht Sahib, which is our political center. And the leader of this political center is our Jathedar. And whenever that Jathedar is to give an order to somebody, as Sikhs, we're supposed to listen to it, and we're supposed to fulfill it. We're supposed to basically agree to it. Now, the Jathedar at that time was Gyani Kirpal Singh, who sent out an order to raise arms and defend the complex. So now the order is given out, and that's why now the Sikhs have all rallied together to now arm themselves and fortify Harmandir Sahib. Because if your house is going to get attacked, why would you not fortify it? Then the other one is that Santaji didn't like Hindus either. This is another very silly one, saying that he wants all Hindus to leave Punjab. All these things, all these lies are just continuously said. Which is another crazy fact, is that even the person that you see on the left there is Shaheed Bhai Hardev Singh Boli Pandit. He was actually a Hindu that fought within the battle and was made Shaheed. And in other cases as well, you had the Ramayan scripture, which is a Hindu scripture. There was Biyadbi done to that once. And the Jatha of Santaji actually paid 5,000 rupees in litigation over that. On top of that, during the Dharam Yodh Morcha, you had the Rasta Roko protest, which is you could say the roadblock protest. And there were 2 Hindus that actually were made Shaheed on that day. And those 2 Shaheeds, the Jatha of the Taksal, on the Akali Dal and the Shromani Committee, they all paid towards those 2 families. So Santaji was saying that if I hated Hindus so much, why would I pay towards their family and their litigations? Now, all of this that I've just mentioned is everything that, not everything, because there's a lot more that went into it. I'm just giving you the basics. But all of this was the start of the battle now. Now, because nothing worked, they weren't able to silence the Sikhs through all of these fake encounters, arresting people, spreading false information about Sikhi. None of these things were working. That is why the Battle of Amritsar took place. They wanted it to be the final blow to the Sikh psyche, that we're going to shut you up for good now. And this was their reason for attacking. And now you would hear that, was it a pre-planned attack or a last-minute attack? Now, in 1982, in the Doon Valley, there was actually a makeshift model of Harmandir Sahib. A makeshift model, and they were actually practicing procedures on how to attack Darbar Sahib. And this was in 1982, when Santaji wasn't even within the complex yet. So they were already planning to attack the Sikhs at this point. And what you see on the board is General Sinha. And General Sinha was also part of the Indian government, the Indian army. And he actually, not only did he say that how can the army attack its own people, first of all, but also he said that he made a procedure for the army to actually go ahead with this procedure of taking Santji out of Harmandir Sahib. And the procedure goes in this interview, it's just a screenshot of that interview. You can see this on YouTube, it's still there today. And he was saying that I said that we should go in without our shoes on. He said, we'll all take our shoes off. We'll make a makeshift gurdwara outside where people can do matha tek. We'll have a prominent leader of the Sikh faith to come and witness us with this whole procedure as well. And we'll even broadcast this live on TV so that everything will be out in the open. But as soon as he gave this procedure, it was just chucked to the side. So when you see interviews with General Bra, because he's made so many YouTube videos and interviews now, you'll see that it was just a last-minute attack, and that's why it was so brutal. But in 1982, they're already planning to attack. And when General Sinha is giving you a procedure which is quite peaceful, why did they not go ahead with that? So they chucked that out, and they decided to go with their own operation, which they called Operation Blue Star. And 70,000 personnel of the Indian government actually came into Punjab, and with the battle itself, you had 15,000 people, 15,000 soldiers to actually attack Harmandir Sahib. And now, as the Sikhs, we weren't going to just let them attack. We were going to obviously defend ourselves. And this whole battle was, you could say, orchestrated, and it was all led by General Shabeg Singh, Sant Jarnail Singh, and Jathedar Sukhdev Singh Babbar. And what's really important is that General Shabeg Singh was actually part of the Indian army. And he, after he got sacked, he came and he was part of the Jatha of Santji. And then because of his expertise within the army, he was able to actually make such a brilliant defense of Harmandir Sahib. And you'll see what he actually planned. They were actually bricking up all the windows, putting sandbags outside all the edges of the complex. And so on the 1st of June, without any sort of warning, the government started to attack and shoot Harmandir Sahib now. Now, General Shabeg Singh, like I said, he knew what the Indian government's tactics were. He knew that once they start shooting and we shoot back, they're going to know exactly where we are. But there were strict orders given to the Singhs to not fire back at all. So what the Indian government were doing, they were on the 1st of June, they were just firing on top of the complex. And this shooting started at 12:40 p.m. all the way up to 8 p.m. And this was done by the CRPF, which is the police force. And even the President of India, who was also Gyani Zail Singh, even he said that later became to know that no such warning had been issued by the authorities. And just a little bit about Bhai Menga Singh Shaheed. They were the first Shaheed of this battle. And after, when I spoke about the 13 Shaheeds that were the 13 Shaheeds in 1978, after that, it kind of hit him quite hard. And he actually took Amrit after this whole massacre occurred. And he was positioned in Baba Atal Rai Gurdwara, which you'll see just there, just outside the complex. And as you can see, the Indian government, the Indian army, they're shooting on top of the complex, but they're also shooting on top of the Langar hall as well. And this is when there's still pilgrims inside. And at that point, he actually managed to kill 3 soldiers. And as his confidence started building up, he went higher and higher into the tower. But then at that point, he was actually shot in the head by a sniper. Right into the forehead, he was shot. And even after being shot in the forehead, the Singhs around him asked him, "How are you?" And his reply to them was, "I'm in Chardikla." Even after being shot in the head by a sniper. And as his body was taken from Baba Atal Rai Tower to Guru Nanak Nawaz, at that time there was no medical facilities, no doctors, so he's still got this bullet in his head. He's still alive. And at that point he's still reciting all of Sukhmani Sahib. For anyone that knows, Sukhmani Sahib takes about an hour, hour and a half, depending on how fast you read it. So for an hour, hour and a half, he's sitting there reciting Sukhmani Sahib, and as soon as he's finished, that's when he's given his Shaheedi. And the next day, on the 2nd of June, he was actually cremated within the complex. On the 2nd of June, you had Indira Gandhi, who addressed the nation on something called Doordarshan TV. And she started talking about this operation, and she's saying that she wants a peaceful solution to this. But what's so peaceful about you firing upon the complex? So they've already given orders to fire upon the complex, but then the next day she's going on TV saying, oh, I want a peaceful solution to this all. And she ended it by saying, don't shed blood, spread hatred. But for anyone that knows, first of all, they've already started shooting, but enough hatred can only lead to shedding blood as well. And on the 2nd of June, there was no shooting on the 2nd of June. But what the government decided was that they're going to let pilgrims still come into the complex. And 10,000 pilgrims actually came into the complex at that time. And everyone that came in, what they were coming in for is because obviously you had Guru Arjan Dev Ji's Shahidi Purab, so there was a lot of preparation for that. So pilgrims were coming in, and they were trapped within Harmandir Sahib, just like a rat trap. Now, not like the rat traps that you see in the cartoons, but a proper rat trap, where you get a box, and the rat goes into the box, but then there's no way for the rat to come back out of it. That's exactly how the Harmandir Sahib complex was for these pilgrims. As soon as they were allowed into the complex, all the trains were cancelled to leave Amritsar, so all of them came back to the complex. And as soon as they were all within the complex, they issued a curfew, saying that no one is allowed out of their houses and no one's allowed out of the complex now either. And they were given no inkling about this at all. They didn't know that a curfew was going to take place. They didn't know any of this. All they knew is that we're coming to remember and celebrate Guru Arjan Dev Ji Shahidi, and instead they've been trapped within Harmandir Sahib. And now it makes us think that the timing of this attack is very questionable. That if you've been planning this attack from 1982, why would you choose one of the busiest times of the year to actually attack Harmandir Sahib? And even on that day, the Akali Dal, because the Dharm Yudh Morcha was still going on, they were actually planning a protest on this day. 1,300 volunteers had come into the preparation for this protest, and even they were trapped inside as well now. So this only means one thing, that they wanted maximum casualty. They wanted to kill as many Sikhs as they can. Doesn't matter whether they were terrorists or they were just innocent Sangat members. And on the 3rd of June, you had a mass media blackout. No foreigners were allowed into Punjab. Nobody was allowed out. And this one reporter, Brahma Chelani, he actually managed to report some of these atrocities that were taking place on the 3rd of June as well. And he said that he saw 13 people had been killed in cold blood with their hands tied behind their back with their dastara. So Singhs were having their dastara taken off their head, had their hands tied behind their back and killed in execution style. And when he reported this, he actually got arrested for it. And it just makes you think that because he got arrested, imagine what other things he might have seen as well. And what else he might have reported on. And then you have the actual battle that took place on the 4th of June. And at this point now, all the Sangat members and all the freedom fighters who were claimed to be terrorists, all of these guys were getting bombarded by cannon fire, gunfire coming from all directions of the complex at this point. This all started at 4 a.m. The Singhs and Singh were still doing their Nitnem, they were still doing Sukhmani Sahib, Asa Divar, there was still Kirtan playing at Darbar Sahib. And at this moment in time, at 4 a.m, it's such a peaceful time, they decided to then start firing upon the complex. And if you see Punjab now, you'll see how hot it is. Go on BBC Weather now if you want. You'll see that it's about 45 to 50 degrees Celsius. And this was probably the hottest time in the year in 1984 as well. And they decided to use such an inhumane strategy that they cut all the water and electricity going inside of the complex. So the fans weren't turning on and they had no water inside. 20,000 pilgrims were trapped inside and many of them even died of dehydration as well. So if this was a whole operation to flush out militants or terrorists, so-called terrorists, then first of all, why would they allow pilgrims to come into that complex? Like Bhai Sukhdeep Singh said last week, he said that what government do you know that will allow pilgrims or innocent people to go into the same building as so-called terrorists? If there's terrorists inside of somewhere, you wouldn't let anybody go into there. And this is an eyewitness account by Devinder Singh, who was in charge of the Sikh library, and he witnessed at 4 a.m. 25-pounder shells being thrown at the Darshan Duri. So that's just by the entrance of the Darbar Sahib. Not only did he see that, he also saw poisonous gas canisters being fired at the complex. He saw a helicopter hovering above the complex that was firing from the helicopter, and then also giving inkling on where all the shooting was coming from. And all he saw was a bunch of boys' bodies being blown to pieces. And this is an eyewitness account by someone that was actually there. And then you'll see that even within the complex, you had Kirtan that was still being played. So even through all of this firing, all of this shooting, like even in the last slide, this Singh, he thought that the whole complex had fallen to the ground. That's how much the complex was vibrating. The sound of all of this shooting and all of these tanks, all this firing was being heard from miles away. And anybody that wanted to come towards the complex that could hear it from other villages, they were all being gunned down as well, so that there was no help given to the Sikhs that were fighting within the complex. Because they had surrounded Harmandir Sahib, and now they were scared that they were going to get surrounded by the whole of Punjab. And within Darbar Sahib, there was actually Kirtan still being played. Now, one thing that we do agree with the Indian government, is that there was no firing from within the golden part of the complex, so the Darbar Sahib. But how do you explain these two Kirtanis that were shot while they were playing Kirtan? One of them was Ragi Avtar Singh, who was a blind 65-year-old, and then you had Ragi Amrik Singh. And it just shows like how fearless they must have been. Even though they weren't physically fighting within the battle, even though there was so much shooting happening, they were still willing to keep the Maryada, the code of conduct of the Gurdwara, to keep playing Kirtan throughout all of this shooting. And just another eyewitness account, on the 5th of June, you had a young college girl who was just one of the thousands of pilgrims within the complex. And she could see that within all of the buildings, all of the rooms, there were like 40, 50 people that were just huddled into a room. And a lot of them were dying of dehydration. And a lot of them were actually getting to the point now, because they're on the 5th day at this point. The government thought that this whole operation would be done in 2 hours. But the Singhs fought so fearlessly that they were on the 5th day now. And even at this point now, the pilgrims are like dying of dehydration, and they want some water, so they go out to the Sarovar to get some water. The next morning, the same college girl sees those same people that went out to get the water, that they were just dying, they were just dead in their own blood by the Sarovar. She even saw angs of Guru Granth Sahib Ji just floating around in the sky. Now that should really, really hit you hard. Because Guru Granth Sahib Ji, like we know, is our living Guru. That's the same equivalent of seeing Guru Nanak Dev Ji being shot by bullets and their body parts being flown in the air. Yeah? That's like seeing Guru Gobind Singh Ji being fired by a tank, and you see all their limbs just being blown to pieces. This is exactly what was happening to Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Loads of sarups of Guru Granth Sahib Ji being blown, being burnt. And now, because the government, the army, they can't seem to actually get into the complex now. Because of all of the firing coming from all directions from the Singhs, they're not actually able to get into the complex. So the only thing that they can resort to now is bringing in armored vehicles and tanks within the complex. And at 10 p.m. they actually decided to bring in the tanks. And this is when it was dark, it was smoky, and there was a lot of fires around the complex. And Gyani Puran Singh actually, who's the eyewitness account to this, he actually thought that the fire brigade had come, because he saw the lights, he saw the bright lights. They came into the complex. He only realized that it wasn't the fire brigade when the tank started firing at him. And it started firing at all of the buildings and all the rooms within the complex, not actually checking whether or not there's actually militant fighters in those rooms, just firing aimlessly. And all he heard was loud cries, wails of women and children filled the air. But at the same time, he said that vigorous battle ensued between the army, and the 40-50 youth who had been holding the forces fought bravely throughout the night, until they were either killed or their ammunition had run out. Now at this point, I just want to talk about this family here. Gyani Mohar Singh and his family, his wife was Bibi Pritam Kaur, and his two daughters were Bibi WhyGuru Kaur and Bibi Satnam Kaur. And as those tanks came in, all the Singhs are firing upon these tanks now, but nothing was avail. There was nothing that these bullets could do to these tanks. Now, Gyani Mohar Singh was actually a Hindu before, and after living with Sant Kartar Singh, falling in love with Sikhi, he actually was blessed with Amrit, and he was so close with Sant Jarnail Singh, with Santji, that he actually became their personal bodyguard as well. And at this time, they'd seen that these tanks are just firing aimlessly at the buildings. And Santji actually told the family, you guys need to go now. Like, they even told them before the battle, you guys need to go. You have two small little girls. It would be best if you guys just leave. But Gyani Mohar Singh said that we've already made an ardas to Maharaj that we're going to attain Shahidi at this point now. And as they saw the tanks coming in and seeing that these bullets aren't doing nothing to the tank, they took it upon themselves to actually strap themselves up with grenades and C4s and run towards that tank. Shouting Jakari, they ran towards the tank and blew that tank up. They blew it up and they took the chains of that tank off of the wheels. So that tank wasn't able to actually move further across the complex. And all the tanks behind them actually couldn't move forward either. And this gave so much josh, so much biras to the Singhs after seeing this, that they just carried on fighting even more and more. Even though they're starving, they're dehydrated, they don't care even if their weapons are working, they're just all going to just keep fighting to their last breath now. And later on, within the movement, Gyani Mohar Singh's family actually carried on the movement after the battle took place. Now on the 6th of June is when the tanks actually started to fire upon Akal Takht Sahib as well now. Because they had taken so when you go into the main entrance of the Darbar Sahib, of the complex, on the right side you have the Akal Takht and on the left side you have the Langar Hall. The left side was all taken over by the Indian army at this point now. And all of the freedom fighters were now in Akal Takht Sahib. And within Akal Takht Sahib, they were still firing on the Indian army. But now the only way that the Indian army could defeat these things is by firing the tank, these squash head shells at the Akal Takht Sahib. And they'd done this at around 4:30 a.m. And what's really scary about these shells is that they don't blow up on impact. They actually penetrate the wall first, and then they blow up inside. So imagine there was a shell that came through, it wouldn't blow up in at the window, it would land right in your laps first and blow up right in front of you. This is the sort of limit they went to flush out these so-called terrorists, even though they knew 20,000 pilgrims were inside as well. Now, it might sound like a massacre, which it was towards the end, but I just want to remind everyone that throughout this whole battle for 5 to 6 days, it was a vigorous battle by the Singhs. They were so fearless that even the soldiers admired how brave and courageous these Singhs were, saying that if I had just a few of these Singhs in my divisions, that I'd be able to take over Pakistan at this point. If I just had just a few of these Singhs in my division. That's how bravely they fought. But the Indian army were able to now kill most of the freedom fighters that are actually defending the complex at this point. And this is where you could say the genocide started. Because even though now all these so-called terrorists are now flushed out or they're killed, they're made shaheed, So many rooms were still being attacked with grenades, poisonous gas. So imagine now they're just walking around the complex, not even checking who's inside the rooms, and just throwing grenades in there, throwing poisonous gas. They were filling up trolleys and trolleys full of innocent pilgrims, all the fighters, filling them up into trolleys, dumping them in the river, taking them to the mortuary, and even some people that were taken to the mortuary, there were some people that were still alive. And they were saying to the soldiers, well, why have you brought him? He's still alive. And they took that same person out, shot him, brought him back saying, look, he's dead now. Carry on. Not only were they killing them, but they also were even within the complex now, going up to all of the women, raping all the women, killing the children, looting the Gorliks, but also burning people alive at this point as well, within the complex. And even the Guardian newspaper, they even described it was a virtual massacre, and a large number of women, children and pilgrims were just gunned down. And even at this point, they were even doing the same thing that they were doing on the 3rd of June, which is tying Singh's hands up behind their back and just shooting them in execution style. And just something that I want to mention is that this is just history repeating itself. Because back in Mir Mannu's jails, babies were getting thrown up into the air and being caught with spears. And these eyewitness accounts, they even say that the same thing was happening in June 1984 within the complex. Babies were getting thrown up into the air and then shot with their bullets. So let's not get surprised when things are happening, because it's happened throughout all of our history as well. And it's going to carry on happening in the future. And all the innocent pilgrims that were still there, that were still alive, because it's been, about nearly 10 days now, 7 to 8 days, all the innocent pilgrims that were dehydrated, they were asking for water now at this point from the soldiers. And from an eyewitness account, she literally said that we were told by the soldiers to drink the urine, the mixture of urine and blood that's on the floor. So if this was all about flushing out terrorists, why are they now attacking the pilgrims at this point? It's just something to keep in mind, that it was never going to be about flushing out terrorists. It was never going to be about an attack on Santaji. It was always going to be an attack on Sikhi itself. Because a lot of people, just like my family as well, would say, well, Santaji should have left the complex. Because of Santaji being within the complex, that's why so many people died. But really, first of all, it ignores the fact that it was an unprovoked attack. But on top of that, there were 70 plus Gurdwara that were also attacked simultaneously. So it was never going to be an operation to flush out terrorists. It was always going to be an attack on Sikhi itself. And something, when I was giving this talk in Slough, a Singh came up to me and he said, do you know, just a fun fact, well not fun fact, but he said, just a fact for you. He goes, do you know how they kind of determined how many pilgrims were massacred? I said, no, I don't. How did they determine it? He goes, you know when you go to the Guru Car, what do? I goes, we take our shoes off. He goes, yeah. He goes, there were 10,000 shoes that were unclaimed after the attack. 10,000 shoes were unclaimed after the attack. And this was from Harmandir Sahib, and then also within those other 70 plus Gurdwara, there were just shoes that were unclaimed. And if this was about terrorists, then how do you explain the army now setting fire to the Sikh reference library? There was no more militants now, no more freedom fighters, no more shooting, but they decided to still destroy all of our Sikh history within Harmandir Sahib. We had handwritten Sarups of Guru Granth Sahib Ji written by the Gurus themselves, all burnt. Over 2,000 Sarups, 2,000 Granths were burnt. Janam Sakhiyan, historical Hukamname, so much history. You know when we talk about, some people say, why is there not enough history on Guru Har Rai Sahib Ji or Guru Har Krishan Sahib Ji? Well, probably because most of our history has been burnt. Not only by the Indian government, but also by the Afghanis who also took over Harmandir Sahib. And even in this book by Tully, Mark and Jacob, they wrote this book in 1985. They were the reporters at that time. And even they said, any army which wants to destroy a nation destroys its culture. That is why the Indian army burnt the Sikh reference library. So now even like if you see with the Native Americans, the Red Indians, if you ask some of them, where do you guys come from? They'll say, I don't know, we've just been here the whole time. Because the Gore, what they do is they destroy your culture first. They cut your case, put you in a suit pant, and then you just kind of forget your roots, your culture, your faith. And this is exactly what they try to do to us. Is burn all of our history so we don't remember it. We don't even have any sort of history to then teach to the future generations. And again, if this was about flushing out terrorists, why is it that afterwards they want to pose outside Akal Takht Sahib in front of the demolished building, smiling, laughing? At this point, there's thousands of bottles that are then brought within Harmandir Sahib for the soldiers to then drink. So just like Bhai Sukhdeep Singh said downstairs, is that if we're drinking and we're smoking, just know that these same people that attacked Harmandir Sahib were doing the exact same thing in Harmandir Sahib after the attack, just to take the mickey even more. And if you see down there on the right, just down here, that's probably an old man that's probably the same age as our grandparents. And even he was shot in cold blood, and then the soldiers are posing with him over his dead body. So now after the attack, you have the Sikh genocide that took place. Now fast forward to the 31st of October. For 5 months, we weren't given the keys of Harmandir Sahib now. 5 months we weren't given the keys. And in the 31st of October, Bhai Beyant Singh and Bhai Satwan Singh took it upon their own hands, and they have a whole katha in itself, and I cannot go into it and I cannot do justice on this. But they took it upon their own hands. They were the bodyguards of Indira Gandhi, and they decided to take it on their own hands to actually assassinate the Prime Minister. They had planned this for 5 months, and they actually, within her own complex of her home, Bhai Satwan Singh actually emptied out a whole magazine of his Sten gun into Indira Gandhi. And then behind him you had Bhai Satwan Singh. And then just for Bhai Beyant Singh's peace of mind, he then shot her 2 more times while she's on the floor. Now this caused a lot of outrage within India, and everyone knows who Amitabh Bachchan is, right? Probably the biggest Bollywood actor ever, right? And a lot of people actually look up to him, even today. But no one knows about something like this. Like I got my own mum, where she's watching Who Wants to Be a Crorepati with Amitabh Bachchan on the screen. And I'm telling her, do you even know what he's done? What he actually done during the 80s? And I had to actually educate her, and I had to educate myself on this, because I didn't know about this either. And on Doordarshan TV, he's actually spewing out violence against the Sikhs, saying "Khoon ka badla khoon," saying blood for blood, blood for blood. And as he's saying this on TV, but he's also standing on stages talking to a group of people, and he's actually ended up pointing out at a Sikh, saying, "There's a Sikh, go kill him now, kill him." And at that time, the crowd was actually quite peaceful. It was only until he got up on the mic, started spewing all this violence, inciting all this violence, that actually made the crowd more rowdy, and they actually went and started attacking that Sikh. No case was made against him. And it makes you think, like, why has no one ever questioned him about this either? And why is it that even my grandparents, who probably lived through that time, they don't know about this? They still watched his film. You know, they like the film Sholle. You know, they looking up to actors like this. Even during the Kisan Morcha, the farmers' protest, everyone loves to support India's cricket team, but that same cricket team was speaking against the farmers, calling them terrorists, calling them separatists, So let's not look up to these actors, because they'll do nothing for us. But it's just something to keep in mind, and also to educate our family on as well. And then on the 31st, later on that evening, after the assassination, you had Gyani Zail Singh. And he went, who was the president of India, he actually went to the hospital where Indira Gandhi was. They tried as much as they can to operate on her, but there was no chance that she was ever going to be alive after that. And his car was actually pelted by stones, and even a motorcycle that was owned by a Sikh was near the hospital, and even that got attacked as well. There was a lot of this beating, like low-level beating of these Sikhs on the 31st. But this kind of paved the way to the violence that then was yet to come now. So now, this is just a disclaimer now. We are going to talk about the genocide that took place in November. So, do forgive me if I do offend anyone, or if you have kids here. So, I have to mention these things because I have to put this into reality. Because sometimes we look at our history and we just brush over it. We've got so much power in the palm of our hands that we get to see the whole world, and we get kind of numb to everything that's happened nowadays. And when we think of our history, we just get a bit like, oh, ho gaya hun. Yeah, it is what it is. But when we actually kind of put it into perspective and see what actually took place, and just imagine this actually happening to you, happening to your families, happening to your mothers, your sisters, your brothers. On the 1st of November, you had the Sikh Sikhs. And a lot of people like myself would say, well, those Sikhs that were in Delhi that got massacred, that got killed, they should have armed themselves. They should have had weapons. You know, the Guru has told us to carry weapons. They should have done that. Well, the Sikh Sikhs were the blacksmiths of the Khalsa. Yeah, from the time of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, they would be cleaning weapons, restoring, making weapons. And in this town in Kalyanpuri, they actually equipped themselves with Shastra, and they actually created a defense within their town. And all the mobs that came to attack this town, they were all repulsed. Everybody was sent packing. Now the mobs, they went back to the police, told them about this. The police came back to that same town, or any Sikh that was armed with weapons, disarmed them all, saying, don't worry, you're safe with us, we'll keep you protected. And then those same mob members came back to that town and then killed everybody. You had Maxwell Pereira. Now you had the whole of Delhi that was just surrounded by these mobs, right? And the first target was the Gurdwara. Now this is the only recorded instance where a police officer actually attacked the mobs as well. So you had Maxwell Pereira, who was the senior police officer, and he protected Sisganj Sahib, where Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji's head was actually cremated. He actually was ordering his constables to actually protect that Gurdwara. Now and he actually fired upon some of the mob members and actually ended up shooting some of them. Now, if you compare that to Wing Commander Manmohan Singh, he was a decorated war hero. He was part of the Air Force, part of the military, and he had 5,000 mob members come outside of his house. He lived in an apartment, and below his apartment was like his talwar shop. So his business was on the bottom, and he had 5,000 mob members coming to attack this shop. They were coming to set fire to the shop, and he actually shot warning shots above the heads of these mobsters. And because they didn't respond, because they didn't back off, he actually shot them. He ended up killing one. And instead of any of those mob members being imprisoned, he was actually sent to prison. And only in 2019 he actually passed away. So he was 88 years old when he passed away. And now, just before I say this, I just want to apologize to the Bibiyan and to anybody that gets offended. But when I read this, it made me sick. Like, I was sick to my stomach when I heard this. And now I just want you to imagine this happening to your own mother or your own sister. This was an eyewitness account by Gurpreet Kaur, who was 45 years old, and she was from this town called Trilokpuri. And she was the mother of 3 sons and 8 men came inside of her home. So imagine 8 men coming inside of your home, raped her, all 8 men raped her, stripped her naked, raped her in front of her boys, and then took her boys out of that house and set fire to them while they're still alive. The main way that these mob members were killing the Sikhs was by dousing them with kerosene, with oil, and then just setting them on fire, putting ties around their necks, setting them on fire, hitting them with rods, any sort of weapons that they can get their hands on. And in this town of Tirupuri, every single male Sikh was murdered. Every single one. There wasn't a single Sikh that was a male left in this town of Tirupuri. And this book, I Accuse, is actually it's a good book to read, because you'll see a lot of the eyewitness accounts that actually took place. And one thing that kind of surprised me was when I read this, I only read the first page, but the first page kind of shocked me so much, because it was a story about this one Bibi who had her own family as well, and these mob members came to attack, and a Hindu priest came and said, stop. He said, stop this, you shouldn't be doing this. He said, don't attack the women and the children. So the mob members listened to this Hindu priest, didn't attack the women or the children, but then killed the husband instead. And this woman was left speechless. She didn't know whether I should take this as a good thing or a bad thing, because if these mob members were so willing to actually listen to this Hindu priest, then why didn't this Hindu priest even say to not attack the husband as well? So just something to bear in mind, something to keep in mind, that it just sometimes confuses you. Like, is this an attack on Sikhi? Is this to protect the women or the children? What is going on here? People were being killed even on the platforms of stations. So imagine going onto the Elizabeth line and people getting headhunted as Sikhs on the trains, being attacked by axes, crowbars, any metal rods, being dragged out of the train and actually being left flat on the platforms. And they were just left there. Even in all the towns that I mentioned, in all of the towns of Delhi, the whole city of Delhi was just surrounded with dead bodies just on the floor, of men, women and children all together. And all these killings continued for 3 days. And it came to the point where mums were actually cutting the case of their sons so that they don't get recognized as a Sikh now. Bhai Singh talks about when he was a young boy during that time, and his mother actually had to dress him up like a girl to disguise him. And this was happening throughout the whole of India, of families being scared that their sons are going to die and that I need to cut their case to protect them from these mob members. Now this was a clear systematic attack on Sikhi, because you're probably wondering, how did they know where all the Sikhs were? And that's because they were given the voters list of where all these Sikhs lived. Not only that, but there was an all-out attack from people that were released from prison. So prisoners were allowed to leave prison. They were taken out of prison and they were given the free pass to go and do whatever you like. Kill, rape, do whatever you like. You have a free pass. You're not going to go to jail for it. You just do whatever you like. Doesn't matter. And if you see some of the numbers, 8,000 people were killed within just Delhi alone, 2,000 on the train, 500 plus soldiers were also murdered. So even if you were part of the Indian army, you weren't let off. And in the rest of India, about 10,000 people were murdered. And compare that to the actual official stats that were given. And what shocked me as well is that 60,000 people were displaced. So within their own homeland, which they called India, 60,000 people were made refugees. And when they had to be set up within these refugee camps that weren't even made by the government. It was Sikhs that the community had to rally together to actually make these camps. And that picture speaks 1,000 words. We are still rotting in camp. So they weren't given any sort of compensation for any of this. And when we talk about who's to blame, you had Rajiv Gandhi, who was told, can you stop these attacks? He was saying that when a big tree falls, the ground is bound to shake, which is quite a chilling response. You had Kamal Nath, who was an MP in the middle there. He was seen with 4,000, leading a mob of 4,000 mob members towards Gurdwara. And the only person that was ever charged was Sanjay Kumar, who was given life imprisonment, which was only in this century. And nobody else was ever charged for this. No one else was ever taken to court. There's been no justice for anything that's ever happened since 1984. Or give it even since 1966. Because all this comes down to Punjab. It all comes down to the water rights, the language rights. And all this killing that I've just mentioned, this was all just because we wanted our water back, and we wanted our language back, wanted our electricity. And now, this is something that really annoys me as well. Like when people give talks like this, is we talk about what can we do next, because everyone talks about the history, but then we want solutions, right? And some of the solutions we've already touched upon last week and downstairs, and it can be just a small step like waking up for Amrit Vela. That might seem very small, but if Maharaj is saying that Brahm Gyani Aap Parmeshwar, and these Brahm Gyanis, these Sants, like Baba Sant, what's his name? Nakia, bhul gaya main. Taksal Jathedar. Came to the UK. Thakur Singh, Baba Thakur Singh. Even they were given the bachan that if every single Sikh was to wake up for Amrit Vela, will be given Khalsa Raj the next day. So when we're talking about, it could be just doing Simran in the morning, even if it's just waking up for 5 minutes, just do it. It's 5 minutes. People, during the battle, with all that shooting going on, were still doing their Nitnem. What's our excuse now, with nobody firing upon us with bullets, to not even wake up for 5 minutes just to do WhyGuru Simran? It could be as small as even going to Santhya. Santhya is where you learn how to read Gurbani. This Gurdwara alone teaches lessons on Tuesdays and Sundays. Tuesdays 6:30 to 8:30. Sundays mornings 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. So when we're talking about what can we do next, it all starts with Sikhi first. If you're already a Singh, if you're on this path, it could be just as small as growing your case now. Because this whole thing was an attack on Sikhi, remember? And even like myself, I was never into Sikhi before. I used to cut my hair, drink, smoke, all of that. But the one thing that opened my eyes was the Kisan Morcha, because then I started following all of the injustices that were happening on the Sikhs. So it wasn't just the farmers' protest, it was also everything else with it. And what it was clear to me is that this is an attack on Sikhi and they want to kill us. So if we can just do the small step of just showing that we're a Sikh, wearing a dastar, growing our case, wearing a panj kakar, you can just slap these people back in the face by just showing them that Sikhs are alive still. And that even though you've killed us so many times, that we're still alive. Even during the Missile period, from 1700 to 1767, so in 62, 67 years, 236,000 Sikhs were murdered and killed. From that fact alone, with that statistics, we shouldn't even be alive now, let alone in 1984. But this all came down because people were pakka in their Sikhi. Sikhi was first. The Panth was always going to be first, and then anything else was always secondary. Now, if you're already like keeping your rat, and you haven't taken Amrit, your next step could be to take Amrit as well. And that might seem like such a big step, because I know if someone was to tell me to take Amrit back when I was a munna, I'd tell you to jog on, mate. Yeah? Because that is a massive step. But that's only because in our head, our families are kind of making it seem like it's such a hard thing to do. It's such a big commitment. Are you sure you want to take Amrit? You got to wake up for Amrit Vela, you got to put your Panchikar on. So what? It's so, like, I'm talking out of experience, it's not a big deal. Don't listen to your family when it comes to that. And the next point is visiting Punjab more often as well. And why that's really important is because even if you're not from Punjab, it's really important to go back to Punjab. Because if you're in love with Sikhi, then you're in love with Punjab simultaneously. You cannot have a connection with Sikhi and not have a connection with Punjab as well. That's literally where our gurus walked. They physically walked on that land. And if we don't go to Punjab and we don't see that all of the injustices that are happening, we don't see all the problems within our own bend, then there's nothing we can do. Because there's nothing we can do just sitting here and just guessing. All of us here are probably from a different bend, yeah? We all come from individual bends. Like, there's so many people here, that's a lot of bend to cover right now, yeah? If we were all to just go back to our bend and just see what issue there is in our bend, that is so much progress. If we can just go to India and go to our bend and just put an ambulance, hire a doctor, put a water tank there. There's a massive drug problem in Punjab. And if it was just as small as just opening up a rehab center, this is all progression of this question, what is our next step, what can we do? Now, the one thing I don't want people to do is be dukkhi about what happened in 1984. Because, like Bhai Singh said, is that this panth is like a flower. And when that flower like dries up, the only way is to flourish is with the blood of the shaheeds. This flower, this panth is only going to flourish when we water it with the blood of the shaheeds. And that's so important to remember. Let's not get scared of Shahidi. When we ask for Maharaj, we say, bless me with Seva and Simran. Don't forget the third S in that as well, which is Shahidi. Now, I didn't know anything about 1984. It's only because I had to give these talks where I actually had to do a bit of research. And I just want to share with you the resources that I actually used. And I think it's really important for us to actually read, do our own research, because what I've touched on is pretty much the basics, the really, really basics of 1984. But when you go through all these books, you go through these podcasts on BOS TV, there's literally over 10 hours of people that are way more versed in 1984 speaking about everything in so much detail that you're going to start falling in love with Sikhi, but also you're going to start feeling the passion for fighting for our rights. When I say that my whole mindset has changed after doing these talks, I can't even explain it. It's actually crazy. And the other thing is that there's so many pages, so many organizations, and another organization, when we talk about what can we do for Punjab, we can easily follow Saving Punjab. In there, they've actually got people on the ground talking about what the actual issues are, statistically, with facts and figures. And we can look at those facts and figures and say, okay, my pind is lacking in this. My pind has a major drug problem. Kids, like these kids here, between, I think it was 8 and 11 years old, kids aren't even able to read a paragraph of Punjabi. I think about 70 to 80% of kids aren't even able to speak Punjabi and read it, because Hindi is still the first language of Punjab. And then you have 1984 tribute. When we talk about the Shaheeds, if you want to learn about these Shaheeds, you'll see in 1984 tribute on their website, you'll see all their biographies. And you'll see the one thing is that they always kept Sikhi first. Just one quick story of Bhai Anok Singh Babbar. When they were captured by the police, they had iron metal rods shoved up into their feet, up to their knees in both legs, stabbed multiple times, had a massive gash in his head with blood pouring out of it. Both of his eyes were taken out. And even at that point, when his head was against the wall, because of all of that blood, his head was dried up. All of his hair, all of his gears dried up, and his head was stuck to the wall. And even in that moment, he asked the security officer, what time is it? And he said, it's 7 p.m. And he said, all right, Tika, reh rasta sama aa gaya hai. And just from memorization, he started reciting Rehra Sahib. And on that day, that security guard actually quit his job. Because he realized that these people, they're not just normal human beings. These guys are literally Devi Devtas on earth. So that's why when we talk about, because it might seem like such a cop-out, oh, you need to do your Amrit Vela, you need to do your Simran, but this is what was powering all of these shaheeds, and this is what was powering everybody to fight for our rights. Maharaj says it in Rehra Sahib as well, is that Jin nirpao, Jin har nirpao te ayaji, tinka pao sab gavasi. That if we were just to meditate and do this WhyGuru Simran that we take so lightly, all of our fears will get dispelled. There'll be no fear left in us if we just do that simple thing, just wake up Amritaville and do that WhyGuru Simran. And just this last point is that if you're not going to do anything that I've said, right, please, I cannot stress this enough. Everybody needs to watch this YouTube documentary. It's called The Final Assault. And I only watched this recently, and this is after I've read the books and I've read watched the podcast, but this just hit it home, this documentary. If we don't stand up and we do something now for Punjab, in 20, 30 years, Punjab is going to be a literal desert. There's going to be no water left in Punjab. There's no point even calling it Punjab now, because of all of that water. If you want to see how, when I talk about all of the water being diverted, this will show you exactly where it's going, how it's getting diverted. And if we don't do nothing now, then literally Punjab is just going to be left into dust. And then Punjab is just going to be part of the history books. And we're going to say, yeah, the Punjabis and the Sikhs were like this. And we're just going to say, oh yeah, they had this culture, that culture. And this is only going to happen in like 20, 30 years. And that's not me saying it. That's not Saving Punjab saying it. That's NASA. NASA's telling us that. And this was 7 years ago this was made. So when I talk about we need a sense of urgency now, I think Bhai Mahinder Singh said it beautifully in one of his talks, is that if your house was going to be set, if I was to tell you your house is going to get set on fire next week, you'll do everything you can to make sure it doesn't get set on fire. So we need to have this sense of urgency now. We show the Battle of Amritsar documentary, which is really good, and we need to know about that. But also we need to be educating people and showing them this documentary as well. Because even it could be as simple as going to Punjab and just showing them how to farm properly and how to be more efficient with your water. Because if we don't do nothing now, honestly, if you watch this, you would get scared. If you don't like horror movies, if you like horror movies, watch this. Because it will scare the living daylight out of you. And if you don't know anything about Sikhi, and you want to build that connection with your Guru, we have the WhyGuru course as well, which will go through all of history. Because if you want to fall in love with Sikhi, you've got to learn the history first. Because then only then you're going to really do what your Guru tells you to do. If you get into an arranged marriage, you're not going to fall in love with that person straight away. So you have to love your Guru before you actually do what they tell you to do. And lastly, there's going to be a march for 1984. It's been 40 years. Let's go out to this march. It'll be on June 16th. There will be coaches leaving from here. And not only would it be a good point and a good time to spread Parchar on 1984, but it'll be a good opportunity to also spread knowledge about Sikhi as well. Because this world is burning and it needs Sikhi very urgently as well. But we have to live it, learn it, and then everything that you learn, just spread it to the world. So I've made so many mistakes. Forgive me for taking up so much of your time. Please forgive me like your younger brother. Deo sajjan asisriyan, jo hove sahib samer. WhyGuru ji ka Khalsa, WhyGuru ji ki Fateh.
मुख फेर प्यारे हाँ वारे मुख फेर प्यारे करवट दे मुको काहे को करवट दे ਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਨਾ ਤੋਰੋ, ਪਿੰਡ ਪਰੈ ਤੋ ਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਨਾ ਤੋਰੋ। ਹਮ ਤੁਮ बीच पहो नहीं कोई, हम तुम बीच पहो नहीं कोई। तुम सोकंत नार हम सोए, तुम सोकंत नार हम सोए। कह कबीर सुनो रे लोई, कहत कबीर अब तुमरे परतीत न होए, अब तुमरे परतीत न होए। करवट दे मोको काहे को करवट दे मोको वारे मुख फेर प्यारे, वारे मुख फेर प्यारे। करवट को काहे का ਜਪ ਲੋ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ 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 ਸਿਰ ਜਾਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਜਾਵੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਨਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਸਿਰ ਜਾਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਜਾਵੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਨਾ ਸਿਰ ਜਾਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਜਾਵੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਨਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਸਿਰ ਜਾਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਜਾਵੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਨਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਜੋ ਤੋ ਪ੍ਰੇਮ ਕੀ ਲੰਕਾਤਾ ਸਿਰ ਤਲ ਤਲੀ ਗਲੀ ਮੇਰੀਆ ਸਿਰ ਤਲ ਤਲੀ ਗਲੀ ਮੇਰੀਆ ਜੋ ਤੋ ਪ੍ਰੇਮ ਕੀ ਸਿਰ ਤਲ ਤਲੀ ਗਲੀ ਮੇਰੀਆ ਸਿਰ ਤਲ ਇਤ ਮਾਰਗ ਪੈਰ ਤਰੀ ਜੈ ਸਿਰ ਦੀ ਜੈ ਕਾਨ ਨਾ ਕੀਜੈ ਸਿਰ ਦੀ ਜੈ ਕਾਨ ਨਾ ਕੀਜੈ ਜੋ ਤੋ ਪ੍ਰੇਮ ਕੇ ਲੰਕਾਤਾ ਸਿਰ ਤਲ ਤਲੀ ਗਲੀ ਮੇਰੀ ਆਓ ਸਿਰ ਤਲ ਤਲੀ ਗਲੀ ਮੇਰੀ ਜਪ ਲੋ ਜੋ ਤੋ ਪ੍ਰੇਮ ਕੇ ਲੰਕਾਤਾ ਬੋਲੇ ਸਤਨਾਮ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਸਤਨਾਮ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਸਤਨਾਮ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਸਤ